The extraordinary Arab-Islamic Summit takes off in Riyadh to address Gaza and Lebanon. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi reaffirms Egypt's opposition to the forced displacement of Palestinians. And the annual United Nations Climate Summit, COP29, begins with discussions on finance and trade. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time, and you're watching now Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in the extraordinary Islamic Summit, which kicked off today in Riyadh, focusing on efforts to end Israel's war on Gaza, escalating military operations in Lebanon, along with their humanitarian consequences and the broader regional developments. The extraordinary Arab-Islamic Summit has begun in Riyadh to address efforts to halt the Israeli aggression in Gaza, the intensifying military actions in Lebanon, and their humanitarian consequences. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reaffirmed the kingdom's firm opposition to Israeli attacks on Gaza and highlighted its support for the Palestinian cause through the International Coalition for a Two-State Solution. He condemned the Israeli occupation forces' operations in Lebanon and voiced opposition to any hindrance to humanitarian work in Gaza. The Arab-Islamic Summit in Riyadh has united leaders from across the Arab and Islamic world to confront the escalating violence in Gaza and southern Lebanon, sparked by the Israeli military aggression across the region.
On November 11, 2024, the Arab-Islamic Summit in Riyadh brought together leaders from across the Arab and Islamic world to address the escalating violence in Palestinian and Lebanese territories, attributed to recent military aggression by Israeli occupation forces. Hosted by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the summit opened with a strong condemnation of the rising civilian casualties and widespread devastation in Gaza and southern Lebanon. In his address, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi highlighted the region's complex crisis and the ongoing aggression against Gaza and Lebanon. He further reaffirmed Egypt's opposition to plans for Palestinian displacement and its long-standing commitment to the peace process in the region. In a Saudi-led call for unity, the summit urged a cohesive Arab-Islamic response to Israeli aggression. Leaders emphasized the urgent need for humanitarian support and called for an immediate ceasefire to protect lives and halt further destruction in the conflict zones. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reaffirmed Saudi Arabia's dedication to advocating for Palestinian rights and its commitment to pursue long-term peace in the region. Representatives from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Arab League joined the summit's unified stance, reiterating support for the establishment of a Palestinian state along the 1967 borders. The emphasis on a two-state solution was framed as essential for achieving sustainable peace and stability in the region. Many leaders called for a robust intervention from international organizations, particularly the United Nations, to address the crisis and hold Israel accountable for alleged human rights abuses and war crimes. The summit also outlined a strategic plan to increase financial and medical support for Palestinian communities, alongside renewed diplomatic efforts to prevent further escalation across the region.
And for more analysis, we now move to Mark in our newsroom. To you, Mark.
Thank you, Hella. Now, to talk more about Riyadh's Arab-Islamic Summit today, we are joined from Cairo by the managing editor of Al-Ahram newspaper, Ashraf Al-Ashri. Thank you very much for being on Qnews. Now, given the current geopolitical climate, how unified are the efforts of Arab and Islamic countries at this summit?
Certainly, this is an extraordinary summit to be convened following 1 year of the regular one in the same date. Before this summit is a set of a challenge, and I think distinguished in the speeches of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that followed several points when called upon the international community that there is in fact a process of genocide in Gaza, and Egypt rejected the liquidation of the Palestinian cause and requested the international community saying that we are in a crossroad and that should require an international community to save the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. And Cairo is to continue the solid stances defending the Palestinian rights and supporting the Lebanese authority by implementing 1701 resolution. Therefore, seeing the summit that is possible of proposing a timetable that should be adopted by ending the genocide in the Gaza Strip, and given the fact that the chief of the U.S. administration presided by Trump in January, and I think that the summit will come up with a positive output, on top of which to be an extension of the Arab ministerial community work by communicating with the U.S. administration to possibly laying out a timetable to put an end of the killing in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon, and to provide an umbrella for the international allies to ensure the two-state solution to be an advanced step towards the possibility of the establishment of a Palestinian state after the of the war and the adoption of the formula of the day after the war. The summit is exceptional, extraordinary. Before only one case is to put an end of the war in the Gaza Strip and the southern of Lebanon.
Okay, and you mentioned the United States there. How do Arab leaders view the role of the international community in stopping the ongoing attacks in Gaza and Lebanon?
Certainly, there are a difference in timing between the two administrations of Biden and Trump. And I think the Arab leaders that the summit is a chance of practicing pressure of the upcoming administration to establish a sort of movement to put an end. There are messages throughout the past 48 hours affirming that it's an American desire to stop the war in Lebanon firstly, and Gaza will take some time. And we'll think that the output of the summit to be and to continue the communication with Biden's administration, and in the meantime to open channels of communication with President Trump to practice a pressure and to put an end of Lebanon, and that will take 2 to 3 weeks as Trump promised to put an end of the wars in Ukrainian and Palestine occupied lands. And there might be not to be happen unless 20 of January, but from now forward, the stoppage of the ceasefire of Lebanon, followed by Gaza. And I think that the Arabs will issue resolutions taking into consideration to put an immediate an end of the stability in the Gaza Strip, to demand that the Security Council and the international community to shoulder their rules. And during the upcoming hearing, we will find a very important either to stop the fires in Lebanon and Gaza and not use the veto right. Otherwise, there will be a great extent of deterioration in the situation in the Middle East. And I think that the Biden administration will choose a time for ceasing the fire in Lebanon, and all the messages will clarify this during the upcoming hours.
Well, thank you very much, Ashraf Al-Ashri, who is the managing editor of Al-Ahram newspaper. Thank you very much for joining us, and back to you, Hala.
Thank you very much, Mark. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has emphasized the region's complex situation and ongoing aggression against Gaza and Lebanon during his speech at the Arab-Islamic Summit in Riyadh. The Egyptian leader has further stated that the future of both the region and the world is at crossroads, and that the aggression against Gaza and Lebanon will not be accepted. President el-Sisi reaffirmed Egypt's opposition to plans aimed at the forced displacement of Palestinians, stressing Egypt has long shouldered the responsibility of leading the peace process and remains committed to it. Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul-Gheit has stated that international inaction has enabled Israel to escalate the conflict, underscoring the urgency of a ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. He highlighted that true peace is incompatible with violence and injustice, accusing Israel of attempting to eliminate hopes for a Palestinian state and systematically undermining Gaza's society, noting that half of Gaza's population live on just 10% of its land. Abul-Gheit also warned that the crisis has reached an intolerable level, requiring adherence to UN Resolution 1701 in Lebanon. The Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Hussein Ibrahim Taha, has stated that the Riyadh summit takes place as Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine and violating Lebanese territories. Taha further emphasized the need to implement the two-state solution and enforce the UN Security Council's ceasefire resolution in Gaza. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has urged Arab and Islamic nations to press the United Nations to suspend Israel's membership unless it abides by international law and holds its actions against Palestinians. He called for implementing Resolution 2735, which mandates ending aggression, ensuring humanitarian aid, and withdrawing forces from Gaza. Abbas also requested that nations reconsider ties with Israel, uphold Jerusalem's holy sites, and support Palestine's full UN membership. He emphasized the need to realize Palestinian funds and strengthen UNRWA's role in Palestine. Jordanian King Abdullah II called on brotherly and friendly nations to participate in launching a humanitarian bridge to break the blockade on Gaza. He also called for delivering urgent aid to the territory suffering from a humanitarian disaster. He stressed the need for immediate action to end the aggression, as well as halt the killing, destruction, and escalation in the region. King Abdullah stated that words have no place at the moment, as the world now needs serious positions and tangible efforts to end the tragedy, save Gazans, and provide the assistance they urgently need. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has criticized the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government for escalating military tensions in the region, including rising hostilities towards Iran, ongoing attacks on Lebanon, and blocking humanitarian aid to Gaza. Speaking at the summit, Erdogan stressed the urgent need to find solutions for delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza, highlighting Israel's destruction of Palestinian presence and its plans to maintain control over Gaza. He also condemned Israel's recent decision to ban UNRWA, calling it an attempt to eliminate the two-state solution and prevent Palestinians' return to their homeland. The Turkish president called for Israel to be internationally isolated unless it ends its aggression in Gaza and Lebanon, advocating for an arms embargo and additional trade restrictions on Israel. Turkey has already imposed further trade limitations with Israel. In his speech at the summit, Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati confirmed including 775 children and women have been martyred and over 4,000 injured due to Israeli aggression on Lebanon. Mikati emphasized Lebanon's urgent need for peace and security to strengthen regional stability. He called for an immediate halt to Israeli attacks on Lebanon and the declaration of a ceasefire, reaffirming his country's commitment to UN Resolution 1701. In his speech at the summit, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has emphasized that the ongoing Israeli aggression cannot be viewed in isolation from the broader Palestinian cause. He stated that if Arab and Islamic countries continue to address the attacks on Gaza with fragmented approaches, they risk paving the way for further massacres that could annihilate the Palestinian people and erase the cause itself. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has expressed support for efforts to end the violence, destruction and suffering faced by the Palestinians. He emphasized the need for effective action to address Israel's actions in Palestinian territories and called for the return of UNRWA operations within Palestine. In his speech during the summit in Riyadh, Ibrahim stated that Israel has surpassed all limits with its acts of genocide against the defenseless Palestinian people. The global community to support the expulsion of Israel from the United Nations due to the threat it poses to the Middle East and the world, as well as to force it to end its massacres against the Palestinians. Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev has expressed support for all practical initiatives aimed at resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through diplomatic means. Speaking at the extraordinary Arab-Islamic Summit in Riyadh, he called for an immediate halt to Israeli military operations and reaffirmed the Palestinian people's right to an independent state. Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Cheikh Al Ghazouani has stated that Israel continues to violate international and humanitarian law by continuing its killing in Gaza and extending its aggression in Lebanon. Speaking at the Arab-Islamic Summit in Riyadh, Al Ghazouani affirmed full solidarity with Lebanon in the face of Israeli aggression and reiterated the call for an immediate ceasefire. He also emphasized that the establishment of a Palestinian state is a fundamental condition for achieving peace. Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye has stated that the Palestinian people are facing unprecedented violence from Israel. In his speech during the Riyadh summit, he added that Israeli violations targeted humanitarian organizations. He also emphasized the call for full condemnation of Israel's actions in Palestine. The annual UN Climate Summit has begun, with countries preparing for intense discussions on finance and trade. This comes after a year of severe weather disasters that has strengthened demands for developing nations for increasing climate funding. The outgoing COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber opened the summit, then handed over the presidency to Azerbaijan's Mukhtar Babayev, who declared this summit a moment of truth for the Paris Agreement. Delegates in Baku aim to tackle the summit's top agenda item, which is securing an agreement for up to $1 trillion annually in climate finance for developing countries, replacing the previous $100 billion target. The Palestine Red Crescent Society, in coordination with the International Committee of the Red Cross, has reported that its teams evacuated 20 patients from Al-Auda Hospital in Jabalia to Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. The PRCS said that the mission took 14 hours, with one patient dying after ambulances were delayed for hours at an Israeli checkpoint separating northern Gaza from Gaza City. 3 hospitals in and around Jabalia have been besieged by Israeli forces for several weeks. Hospital officials have resisted army orders to evacuate or abandon patients, despite severe shortages of food, medical supplies, and fuel.
سكر يلا سكر
5 Palestinians, including a child, were injured by Israeli occupation forces during a raid on Al-Jalazon refugee camp north of Ramallah. Security sources reported that soldiers fired live and rubber-coated bullets along with tear gas at Palestinians and their homes while storming the camp. The occupation forces also arrested 2 young Palestinians after raiding and searching their homes. Meanwhile, the Israeli occupation forces have arrested 3 Palestinians from Nablus and Askar al-Balad east of the city. Local sources said that the forces raided several homes in Nablus and a shop in the Eastern Market, where they caused damage. Meanwhile, the occupation forces continued their incursions into several Palestinian cities and towns across the occupied West Bank. In Hebron Governorate, soldiers arrested 8 Palestinians during raids in various towns and refugee camps and continued blocking entrances to towns and camps in Hebron with iron gates. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. The extraordinary Arab-Islamic Summit kicks off in Riyadh to address Gaza and Lebanon. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi reaffirms Egypt's opposition to the forced displacement of Palestinians. And the annual United Nations Climate Summit COP29 begins with discussions on finance and trade. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at News EG to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.